Welcome, friends of the Greasy Shop Rag. Today we're going to take a look at a Husqvarna 395XP chainsaw. The customer complaint is that it keeps flooding on him and he can't get it started. So we talked it over a little bit, and we're going to give him a tune-up and open up the carb and take a look and see what's going on there. I would say that this repair is typical of half of the repairs I do. Open up the carb and take a look. Throw a spark plug and a fuel filter, maybe a fuel line in it. And then just look over the rest of the saw and make sure there's no major problems with it. But we are going to introduce a new tool to the channel. This is the SnapOn suction pump, or transfer pump I should say. And you can see it looks like an impact driver, but it's driving a pump. And I'm sucking the fuel right out of the tank and into my container. Now I should first say that SnapOn does not recommend using this with flammable liquids. But I'll tell you what, it works great on flammable liquids so far. No fires to report. Why did I get this instead of just dumping the fuel out by tipping the saw over? Well, a lot of fuel tanks are full of concrete dust, wood, pulp kind of things, dirt in general. And it takes a lot of effort to dump some fresh fuel back in, swish it around, dump it out. You know, lather, rinse, repeat 4 or 5 times, maybe more, to get everything clean. With this tool, I think I can kind of vacuum the mess out of there. And the couple times that I've used it has worked really good. That pump will move 6 gallons per minute. I was not running it at the fastest speed. It's got a variable speed trigger on it. And boy, it works really good. Now I had that small hose on the suction side, but it also comes with a bigger hose the same size as the one on the discharge side for moving bulk liquids. You'll probably see that on the channel a little bit more. But you better. As much as I paid for it, I need to justify it and use it. So we are pressure testing the fuel line and the carburetor. We put 10 pounds of pressure on it, and it held. So now it's going to get a new fuel filter. I know that the fuel line does not have a hole in it now. Now that we've accomplished that, let's pop the hood and see what we got going on underneath here. The 395 has a really nice big air filter on it. Nice big mesh or felt pleated filter. There's one screw on a hose clamp that holds it in place. And this one's in pretty good shape. I'm going to shine a light through here, and I can see light shining through the pleats, so I know it's not plugged up. And you can go through and check the whole filter with a flashlight like that and make sure there's no holes in it. So now we're going to pull the spark plug boot off. Giving it a little bit of a twist really helps. And then we're going to spin the spark plug out. Right now I'm just blowing debris away from the base of the plug so that when the plug comes out, no debris falls into the cylinder. Spark plug looks a little sooty, and the cylinder looks acceptable. I mean, this is not a spring chicken here. This is like a 2008 model, I think. So we just wanted to check it for wear. So now that we've got the plug out, we're going to check it for spark. Now, I'm watching this video, and it does not look like there's spark here. But I know that I wouldn't have just screwed a new plug in there and not looked at the ignition system if it didn't have spark. So maybe, you know, my camera work ain't so great. So now we're going to pull the top cover off. And here I'm just looking at the ID tag and confirming that this is a 2008 model. And the customer said he bought it new and he never had anyone into the carburetor before. And that was kind of how we arrived at the plan to give it a tune-up and open up the carb. This isn't terrible underneath here, considering he probably doesn't get underneath here a lot to clean it. So on a 395 we have this white piece that's the air filter base. There's 2 screws that bolt it down to the tray. And then there's going to be 2 screws that run through it and bolt the carb to the intake. They're 3mm sized hex to spin them out. Long, thin bolts. And you'll see in a minute here why they're thin. So, not using power tools here. Should have had this off already. There we go. Alright, the fitting on the top is our pulse line. This fitting here is for the fuel line from the filter. We've got our throttle linkage here. We're just going to roll that cable off of there. And then we have our choke lever. We kind of turn the choke lever a little bit to roll it out of the hook on the carburetor. And there we go. We harvested 1 carburetor. Take a look inside the intake at the piston skirt. Looks beautiful. And we'll clean the schmutz off of the carburetor. So here's these red plastic bushings. Don't lose these. Sometimes this is pushing out real hard, but sometimes they just fall out when you tip the carburetor. Now, I'm not sure why they, every other carburetor just uses a bigger bolt, and these use a small bolt in the bushing, but it's what it is. So be mindful of it. And here we have our carburetor stand. Now, in a previous video, I told you that I'm now offering these carburetor stands for sale to help support the channel. I know a lot of people had asked about them. They look like this. Alright, there's a little magnetic decal on here. You can take it off. There's a magnet on the back side. There's a link to my eBay store in the description. If there's not a link there, that means they're sold out. So we took a look at the metering diaphragm in the carburetor on our handy dandy carburetor stand. And it was kind of stiff, but not super stiff. Probably just stiff enough that it was creating some problems. So we got a new carb kit. These kits come with usually more gaskets than you need. So part of the game is deciding which gaskets you want to use and which gaskets you don't want to use. Sometimes even come with 2 different style needles. So here we have loosened the screw that holds the cross pin that goes through the metering lever. We removed our needle and metering lever. Took a look down in there at the seat. Didn't see any schmutz in there. And then we'll install a new needle with the same metering lever. If I don't see any wear on the end of the metering lever where the metering diaphragm touches it, then I use the old lever. Some of these kits, if you're not using an OEM kit, sometimes these metering levers are a little wonky. But once it's back in there, you want to check the metering lever height. And in this case, it should be flush with the bottom of that. I call it the bowl of the carburetor. And if you have to adjust it like I am, you either pry up on the end that meets the metering diaphragm in the middle, or you push down on the needle end of it and then push down on the metering lever end and make your adjustment. If you don't have a Walbro or a Zama gauge like this, you need to get them if you're going to be doing this kind of work. They're stamped with all the different models of carburetors, and then depending on which edge of the tool you line up, you know, it shows you where your height should be. So here's our metering diaphragm, and there's a groove in the pin on this one. They don't all have that groove, but this one does, and you have to lock it underneath the metering lever. So we get it hooked there, and then fondle this gasket for an uncomfortably long time. I don't know what the hell I'm doing here. And then get our cover on it. And then run the screws down in. And don't ask me where you can get that screwdriver, because I bought it on Amazon and I can no longer find it. But I tell you what, it's so handy that I went to buy another one. That's why I know I can't find it anymore. So I said before that sometimes these kits come with multiple gaskets. Well, I had put the wrong gasket on here. And then something in my mind said, hey, I don't think this is right. You got to go back and look. And sure enough, I had the wrong gasket in there. I wonder if that ever happens to you. It's like you're doing a job and your mind is kind of split in half. And one half is just kind of watching and observing and recording the whole thing. I mean, sometimes I'll wake up in the middle of the night and I'll think, holy crap, I forgot to torque down the muffler bearings or whatever. And sure enough, the next day I go to the shop and I'll look at that piece of equipment and the muffler bearings will be loose. I don't know. Weird. Weird how the mind works. So now we're putting the carburetor back in. I'm putting the fuel line on the side. And I got the pulse line on the top. Got the throttle cable locked into the carburetor. And we got the choke lever on. Now the intake air filter adapter. That goes on. And double check. Make sure you didn't lose one of those red bushings. That carburetor will sit on there kind of wonky if you don't. I don't know. I mean, T-handles are handy, but I really like using power tools. Problem with power tools is I usually got to finish up with a T-handle to get the right feel for the amount of torque I'm putting down. So now we're going to tighten down that air filter adapter with a T-handle. We're gonna give this thing a run, and you'll see that when I start it up, it smokes really bad, but it starts on the first pull. A dry carburetor starts on the first pull. That tells me there was a lot of fuel sitting in the bottom of the crankcase. And when you see how much smoke this thing pukes out, you'll agree it was flooded. The guy had a flooding problem. We're just getting our fuel in here. And then we'll give it a try. So that's all I'm going to have for you on the Husqvarna 395XP that wouldn't start due to flooding. Thanks for watching. Later.
Oh,